1. Agroforestry. Agroforestry defined. Agroforestry is a land use that involves deliberate retention, introduction, or mixture of trees or other woody perennials in crop animal production field to benefit from the resultant ecological and economical interactions. In agroforestry systems there are both ecological and socio-economic interactions between different components. This implies that agroforestry normally involves two or more species of plants, or plants and animals, at least one of which is a woody perennial. An agroforestry system always has two or more outputs. The cycle of an agroforestry system is always more than 1 year, and even the simplest agroforestry system is structurally, functionally, and socio-economically more complex than a monocropping system. Community forestry, farm forestry and social forestry. The escalating worldwide interest in tree planting activities during the past 3 decades, 1970 onwards, resulted in the emergence and popularization of several terms ending with word, forestry, viz. Community forestry, farm forestry and social forestry. In all these one thing is common, i.e. people's participation in tree planting activities not necessarily with agricultural crops or animals as is in agroforestry. The social forestry is considered to be the practice of using trees or tree planting specifically to pursue social objectives, to help the poor people to improve their living and meeting their routine requirements of fuel, wood and fodder. In its report on farm forestry, National Commission on Agriculture, 1976, remarked that program of bund planting and field boundaries by farmers themselves will constitute farm forestry. Farm forestry has been defined as given below. An integration of farming with forestry practices on the farm to benefit agriculture. It does not mean forest tree culture at the cost of agriculture. The concept originated for making agriculture economically viable. Incidentally, the terms social forestry, farm forestry, agroforestry and extension forestry have been alternatively used with similar objectives on almost similar or different land types. Community forestry, a form of social forestry, refers to tree planting activities undertaken by a community on community land or panchayat land. Similarly, community forest is a tree-dominated ecosystem managed for multiple use. It is based on the local community, people's direct participation in the process of growing trees themselves and processing or utilizing the tree produces locally in a systematic way. Community forestry has been defined as, community forestry is based on the local control over, and enjoyment of the benefits from, the local forest resources. These benefits are not simply monetary, nor are they derived exclusively from timber production. 227. 922. But may vary with the many values associated with the forest ecosystems, including cultural, spiritual, social, medicinal, ecological, recreational, aesthetic and economic values. Unfortunately, this program is hampered because of one reason, that this plantation is of everyone, common property, and there is nobody to care for it. It was also given the name, tragedy of the commons, assuming that the land held in common will be exploited by all, and maintained by no one. Farm forestry, a term commonly used in Asia, indicates the tree planting on farms may be commercial or arable crop producing farm. The purpose of all these forestries is growing trees and using them to provide fuel, medicine, minor timber and fodder. The major distinction between agroforestry and these other terms seems to be that agroforestry emphasizes the interactive association between woody perennials and agricultural crops and animals for multiple products and services. The other terms are for simply planting the woodlots. However, at times all these are used synonymously. Need and scope of agroforestry. Agroforestry, in true sense, has been realized as the need of the hour. It does not confine to regional geographical or agroclimatic boundaries. Agroforestry for food, fuel and fodder. Owing to increase in population of human and cattle, there is increasing demand of food as well as fodder, particularly in developing countries like India. Each year farmers of the world must now attempt to feed 81 million more people irrespective of weather. It is important to note that there will be 19% decline in cropland per head by the end of this century due to population explosion. Therefore, there is slight scope to increase food production by increasing the area under cultivation. A management system, therefore, needs to be devised that is capable of producing food from marginal agricultural land and is also capable of maintaining and improving quality of producing environment. The different aspects in which agroforestry can help in enhancing the productivity of our lands to meet the demand of ever-growing human and livestock population are discussed here. Food. 1. Enhanced sustainability of cropping systems through soil and water conservation by arrangements of trees to control runoff and erosion. 2. Enhanced food and feed production from crops associated with trees through nitrogen fixation, better access to soil nutrients brought to surface from deep tree roots, improved availability of nutrients due to high cation exchange capacity of the soil and its organic matter and mycorrhizal associations. 3. Food for man from trees as fruits, nuts and cereal substitutes. 4. Feed for livestock from trees. 5. Microclimate improvement due to trees, particularly shelter belts and wind breaks. 228. 923. Water 1. Improvement of soil moisture retention in rain-fed croplands and pastures through improved soil structure and microclimate effect of trees. 2. Regulation of stream flow, reducing flood hazards and a more even supply of water through reduction of runoff and improvement of interception and storage in infiltration galleries. 3. Improvement in drainage from waterlogged or saline soils by trees with high water requirements. Energy 1. Fuel wood for direct combustion. 2. Pyrolytic Conversion products such as charcoal, oil and gas. 3. Ethanol produced from fermentation of high carbohydrate fruits. 4. Oils, latex and other combustible saps and resins. Shelter. 1. Building materials for shelter construction. 2. Shade trees for people, livestock and shade-loving crops. 3. Windbreaks and shelter belts for protection of settlements, crop lands, pastures and roadways. 4. Fencing, live fences and fence posts. Raw material for industries. 1. Raw material for pulp and paper industry. 2. Tannins, essential oils and medicinal ingredients. 3. Wood for agricultural implements and various crafts. 4. Weaving cash. 1. Direct cash benefits from sale of tree products. 2. Indirect cash benefits from increased productivity. Classification of agroforestry systems. Agroforestry systems can be classified on the basis of structure, function and socio-economic aspects. Structural classification of agroforestry systems. The structure of the agroforestry system can be defined in terms of its components and expected role or function of each. In this system, the type of components and their arrangement are important. Hence, on the basis of the structure, agroforestry systems can be grouped in nature of components and arrangement of components. 229. 923. Nature of components. On the basis of the nature of the components, the following are the common agroforestry systems. 1. Agrisilviculture, trees plus crops. 2. Boundary plantation, trees on boundary plus crops. 3. Block plantation, block of trees plus block of crops. 4. Energy plantation, trees plus crops during initial years. 5. Alley cropping, perennial hedges plus crops. 6. Agri-horticulture, fruit trees plus crops. 7. Agrisilvi-horticulture, trees plus fruit trees plus crops. 8. Agrisilvipasture, trees plus crops plus pasture or animals. 9. Silviolriculture, trees plus vegetables. 10. Hortipasture, fruit trees plus pasture or animals. 11. Hortiolriculture, fruit trees vegetables. 12. Silvipasture, trees plus pasture animals. 13. Forage forestry, forage trees plus pasture. 14. Shelter belts, trees plus crops. 15. Windbreaks, trees plus crops. 16. Live fence, shrubs and under trees on boundary. 17. Silvi or hortisericulture, trees or fruit trees plus sericulture. 18. Horti apiculture, fruit trees plus honeybee. 19. Aquaforestry, trees fishes. 20. Homestead, multiple combination of trees, fruit trees, vegetable etc. Besides these common agroforestry systems, there are many more component combinations followed in different agroecological regions of India. Arrangement of components. The arrangement of components gives first priority to plants. Even in agroforestry system involving animals, their management according to a definite plan, a rotational grazing scheme, gives precedence to plants and animals. Such plants arrangements in multi-species combinations involves dimension of space and time. Spatial arrangement of plants in an agroforestry mixture may result in dense stands, as in home gardens, or in sparse mixed stands, as in most systems of trees in pasture. The species, or species mixture, may be laid out in zones or strips of varying widths. There may be several forms of such zones, varying from microzonal arrangements, such as alternating rows, to macrozonal ones. A common example of zonal pattern is hedgerow intercropping, alley cropping, and an extreme form is the boundary planting of trees on edges of plots and fields for a variety of purposes: fruit, fodder, fuelwood, fencing, soil conservation or windbreak. The extreme forms of macrozonal arrangements can lead to soil cropping systems, but interactive association of different. 230.com. 924. Components can be used as criteria to decide limits between zonal agroforestry and sole crop, component, plots. Temporal arrangement of plants in agroforestry may also take various forms. An extreme example is the conventional shifting cultivation cycle, involving 2 to 4 years of cropping and more than 15 years of fallow cycle, when a selected woody species or a mixture of species may be planted. Similarly, some silvipastoral systems may involve grass alleys in rotation with some species of grasses remaining on the land for several years. These temporal arrangements of components in agroforestry are termed coincident, concomitant, overlapping, relay cropping, separate and interpolated. Functional classification of agroforestry systems. Two fundamental attributes of all agroforestry systems are productivity and sustainability. Productive functions. The various productive functions, producing one or more products, of agroforestry systems are food, fodder, fuelwood and other woods, besides other products. Protective functions. The protective functions, protecting and maintaining production systems, of agroforestry systems are windbreak, shelter belt, soil conservation, moisture conservation, soil improvement and shade, for crops, animals and man. Socioeconomic classification of agroforestry systems. Based on such socio-economic criteria as scale of production and level of technology input and management, agroforestry systems are grouped into 3 categories. Commercial system. The term commercial is used whenever scale of the production of the output, usually a single commodity, is the major aim of the system. The scale of operations is often moderate to large and ownership may be government, corporate or private. Labor is normally paid or otherwise contracted. Examples include commercial production of agricultural plantation crops, other crops or pasture animals, with permanent underplanting of food crops, or pasture animals, commercial production of shade-tolerating plantation crops such as coffee, tea and cacao under overstory shade trees, rotational timber or food crops system in which a short phase of food crop production is used as a silvicultural method to ensure establishment of timber species, various forms of tongia, commercial grazing and ranching under large-scale timber and pulp plantations etc. Intermediate agroforestry system. Intermediate agroforestry systems are between commercial and subsistence scales of production and management. Production of perennial cash crops undertaken or medium to small size, wherein cash crops cater for cash needs, and land or long-term tenancy rights to land, reside and work themselves on the land, supplemented by paid temporary labor. Various agroforestry. 231. 924. System in many parts of the world can be considered intermediate systems, especially those based on plantation crops such as coffee, cacao, numerous fruit trees and short rotation timber species. Subsistence agroforestry system. Subsistence agroforestry systems are those wherein use of land is directed towards satisfying basic needs, and is managed mostly by the owner or occupant and his family. Cash crops including sale of surplus production of commodities, and all forms of traditional shifting cultivation are the most widespread examples. The words systems and practices are often used synonymously in agroforestry literature. However, an agroforestry system is a specific local example of a practice, characterized by environment, plant species and their arrangement, and socio-economic functioning. An agroforestry practice denotes a distinctive arrangement of the components in space and time. Although hundreds of systems have been recorded, all consisting of about 20 distinct practices. The various facets of agroforestry have been conceptualized, which include all activities of tree planting and forestry where farmers are involved. Derived benefits depend on them for daily domestic needs in prevailing land uses in the ambit of agroforestry. Even forest grazing and natural silvipastures or natural savannas from where grazing and firewood collection benefits are obtained could be the part of agroforestry helping agricultural economy and livelihood need. Tonja cultivation. The Tonja system is like an organized and scientifically managed shifting cultivation. The word is reported to have originated in Myanmar, Burma, and Thoyang means hill, ya means cultivation, lay hill cultivation. It involves cultivation of crops in forests or forest trees in crop fields and was introduced to Chittagong and Bengal areas in colonial India in 1890. Later it had spread throughout Asia, Africa and Latin America. Essentially, the system consists of growing annual arable crops along with the forestry species during early years of establishment of the forest plantation. The land belongs to forest department or their large-scale leases, who allow the subsistence farmers to raise their crops and in turn protect tree saplings. It is not merely temporary use of a piece of land and a poverty level wage, but is a chance to participate equitably in a diversified and sustainable agroforestry economy. Tonja system is practiced in Kerala, West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, and to a limited extent in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, Karnataka, as well as in the Northeast Hills region. It is practiced areas with an annual rainfall of 1,200 to 1,500 mm. The practice consists of land preparation, tree planting, growing agricultural crops for 1 to 3 years, and then moving on to repeat cycle in a different area. In some cases crops may be grown 1 year before the trees are planted. A large variety of crops and trees, depending upon the soil and climatic conditions, are grown under the system. The owner of the land, and hence the trees, is the State Forest Department. Establishment of teak, Tectona grandis, plantations is the most remunerative Tonja practice for forest departments. Due to prevailing land shortages, and possibility of growing highly remunerative crops like paddy, tapioca. 232. 924. Ginger and turmeric. The farmers in Kerala are willing to pay to lease forest land for Tonja. In the high hills of Tamil Nadu, Eucalyptus globulus, Acacia myrni and Pinus species are established after growing a crop of potatoes. More recently, cashew plantation in the coastal area of Andhra Pradesh has been established in combination with groundnut. It is also possible to grow 2 crops of groundnut in a year. In the agreement between the farmer and the landowner, it is mentioned that groundnut leaves cannot be removed from the land due to their value in the soil conservation and fertility improvement. Since 1960s, large commercial farmers have used Tonja for establishment of poplar plantation with irrigation in submontane, subhumid Tarai region of Uttar Pradesh. Agroforestry applications. Farming system. Agroforestry is a practice of natural resource management. So technologies related to integrated production systems involving crops, livestock, perennials and fisheries need to be addressed with changing economy. The value of commerce in agriculture would be appreciated, and farmers' decision on land use would be increasingly based on the comparative advantage rather than on subsistence needs of the farm household. Therefore, a major shift might be expected in agricultural production through diversification. These shifts in production system will get further boost because of integration of world markets, urbanization and rising personal incomes. Further, to design appropriate farming systems suited to diverse farming situations, farmers' participation beginning from planning till execution of research program will be inevitable, and they would actually participate in research efforts. Resource conservation. Watershed management is an approach for area planning based on conservation of natural resources, especially land, water and plants, to meet socio-economic needs of the human society. The watershed management plan for treating different parts should be decided by simple measures for protection of the resource base and created assets, improvement of productive system, generation of employment opportunities and ensuring higher income on a recurring basis. Degraded land because of many limitations can only be improved through agroforestry, which controls erosion, reduces runoff, improves in situ soil moisture conservation, increases water table and also improves productivity as well as profitability. Researches involving agroforestry are still required on many areas like watershed hydrology, control of sedimentation, situation-specific cost-effective technologies, production of fodder, forages, industrial grasses and medicinal plants for quick return and livestock. Improvement program for harnessing maximum benefits from limited biomass. Carbon sequestration. The third assessment report of Intergovernmental Panel on Climatic Change, IPCC, asserts that the Earth's climate is changing and that its impact will be great on developing countries. India. 233. 925. Is a signatory to the Kyoto Protocol, 1997, which asserts that the country will play an important role in mitigating effects of global warming. Use of agroforestry systems as mitigation strategy is a key through a major opportunity for carbon sequestration. Concerted efforts are required to identify practical cost-effective means through changes in land use practices using agroforestry as an option. Biodiversity conservation. It is established that India is having rich vegetation with good biodiversity. According to the Government of India report, biological diversity is estimated to be over 45,000 plant species and 810,000 animal species, representing 7% of the world flora and 95% of world fauna. Agroforestry innovations contribute to biodiversity conservation through integrated conservation development approach. Forest degradation has caused immense losses to biodiversity, which can be conserved through agroforestry by adopting a strategy of conservation through use. Improvement in soil fertility and structure. Plantation of compatible and desirable species of woody perennials on farmlands can result in improvement in soil fertility. There are several possible mechanisms of this, which include 1. Increase in organic matter content of soil through addition of leaf litter and other plant parts. 1. More efficient nutrient cycling within system and consequently more efficient utilization of nutrient that are either inherently present in soil or externally applied. 3. Biological nitrogen fixation and solubilization of relatively unavailable nutrients. Ig. Phosphate through activity of mycorrhiza and phosphate solubilizing bacteria. 4. Increase in plant cycling fraction of nutrients, with their resultant reduction beyond the nutrient-absorbing zone of soil. V. Complementary interaction between component species of system, resulting in a more efficient sharing of nutrient resources among components. 6. Enhanced nutrient economy, because of different nutrient-absorbing zones of root system of component species. 7. Moderating effect of additional soil organic matter on extreme sale reactions and consequently improved patterns of nutrient release ability. Improvement in organic matter status of the soil can result in an increased activity of favorable microorganisms in root zone. In addition to nutrient relations, such microorganisms may also produce growth-promoting substances through desirable interaction and cause commensalistic effects on the growth of the plant species. Inclusion of trees and woody perennials on farmlands can, in the long run, result in marked improvements in physical conditions of the soil. The influence of trees on hydrological characteristics can extend from microset to farm and regional levels. Although effect of water use by a tree component on water availability to crop plants in different climates is not yet fully understood, there is evidence that hydrological characteristics of catchment areas are favorably influenced by trees. 234. 925. Agroforestry systems in different regions. Eastern Himalayan region. The indigenous tribes, Lepcha and Limbu, used to collect large cardamom from natural forests, which was later on domesticated. Among 3 dozen shade tree species in large plantation area, alder, Alnus nepalensis, is found to be the most abundant and preferred tree, which is non-leguminous nitrogen-fixing tree. Besides large cardamom, many food crops like maize, millet, potato, barley, chilies and colocasia are grown with alder. The tree not only provides shade to arable crops, timber and fuel wood but also ameliorates soil and protects it from erosion on hilly slopes. A yield of 400-500 kg of cardamom has been reported in a year under shade trees. Cultivation of coffee, ginger, cardamom, turmeric and medicinal plants under the shade of naturally growing trees in Meghalaya is one of the best examples of successful combination of trees with annual crops. Western Himalaya. In the Western Himalaya, 60 to 70% requirement of the firewood is met from the arboreal components and several MPTs along the bunds of agricultural lands or scattered trees on the pasture lands. Growia optiva, Celtis australis, Bohemia variegata, Albizia chinensis, Bombax chiba, Melia acederach and Tuna ciliata are common MPTs, while plum, Prunus domestica, apricot, P. armeniaca, peach, P. persica, almond, P. dulcis, and pear, Pyrus communis, are common fruit trees of agri. Hortisilvicultural and agri-horticultural systems. Hedgerow intercropping is feasible and important on sloping hilly lands when plant biomass during cropping season can be used for fodder and fuel wood. Agri-silviculture and silvipasture. Agri-silviculture and farm boundary plantation are most preferred systems at all the centers. In Bihar and Jharkhand, apiculture, homesteads, and aquaculture are also preferred. Different models of agroforestry are preferred under rain-fed system. In the Indo-Gangetic Plains regions, it is observed that in the lower Gangetic Plains region agri-silviculture was preferred with 25 to 30 trees ha on rain-fed areas compared to 10 to 15 trees ha on irrigated areas. The number of species in irrigated areas was also more compared to rain-fed sites. The common species were Terminalia arjuna and Acacia auriculiformis. Agri-silviculture and farm boundary plantation are most preferred systems at all the centers except in Bihar, where apiculture, homesteads, and aquaculture are also preferred. In the areas of Kanpur, silvipasture is also practiced. L. leucocephala plus napier, A. amara plus grass plus stylo, silviculture, casuarina, on salt-affected soils and agrisilvi fisheries in low-lying areas and ponds. The most preferred tree species are Populus deltoides, Eucalyptus sp. Dalbergia sissu, Acacia nilotica and Prosopis juliflora. Preferred fruit trees were Mangifera indica, Psidium gojava, Embleca officinalis, Lychee chinensis and Ziziphus mauritiana. Species like Maduka latifolia and Azadirachta indica are predominant in the Middle Gangetic Plains region. 235. 926. Agri-silviculture is common at Ralpur and Ranchi areas. Acacia nilotica, Gmelina arborea terminalia Arjuna, Butea monosperma. Albigia spp are grown in Ralpur while Ziziphus mauritiana, B. monosperma, I. Gilma melos. Mangifera indica, Schleichera oleosa, Kusum, at Ranchi Center. Homestead agroforestry is also being practiced using Gmelina arborea Artocarpus heterophyllus Maduka latifolia, Ziziphus mauritiana etc. In Punjab and Haryana very high tree density is used due to intensive plantation of populous deltoids in blocks. In many such plantations fruit trees, like Mangifera indica, Lychee chinensis, are also being integrated to optimize the profits. Hortipastoral and agri-horticultural. Mango, Mangifera indica, guava, Psidium gojava, jamun, Syzygium comini, and burr, Ziziphus mauritiana, are the important fruit-yielding trees in the entire Indo-Gangetic Plains. In Bihar region Lychee chinensis, is important fruit species. In all these plantations in earlier years of their growth arable crops may be taken. In some areas these are left open for grazing of cattle. But grazing should be stopped and forage grasses may be cultivated. Species like Maduka indica and Neem, Azadirachta indica, have also shown their preference in most of the region. Agroforestry system for soil conservation. In ravine lands trees like Acacia nilotica, A. ebenea, A. catechu, Prosopis juliflora, Dalbergia sissu, Azadirachta indica and Pongamia trinode are most effective in association with forage grasses like Dichanthium annulatum, Bothriocloa pertusa, Cencrus ciliaris, Chrysopogon fulvus, Synodon dactylon, Sehima nervosum and Panicum spp eucalyptus barber grass, Eulaliopsis binta, system has been found quite efficient in shivalics. This showed highest economical returns and negligible soil loss, 0.07 tons ha, followed by Acacia catechu, forage grass, 0.24 ton ha, followed by Leucaena napier grass, 0.28 ton ha, system. Vetiveria zizanius is also an excellent soil binder. Hedgerow, alley, cropping. The main purpose of alley cropping is usually to exploit soil improvement potentials of hedgerow shrubs and to check soil erosion when grown on sloping land. This also helps in increasing production and obtaining a variety of products such as fuel wood and fodder when lopped and food or forage crops in interspaces. On sloping lands, forage shrubs are planted across the slope and forage grasses and legumes or food crops in interspaces. Gliricidia sepium and Leucaena leucocephala are most common hedgerow crops. Morus alba, Sainsiemia, perennial Cajanus cajan and Pithecelobium dulls have also been tried in some fields. Gliricidia leaves may also be used as mulch. Most of the research work on alley cropping in India concentrates on Leucaena leucocephala in semi-arid regions. It has been reported that 40 to 50 days harvest intervals at cutting heights of 75 and 150 centimeters could yield 50% or more foliage as compared at 15 centimeters cutting height. Lower harvest frequency. 236. 926. Narrowed yield differences between 15 and 75 centimeters cutting heights, but at 150 centimeters height it produced more foliage at longer intervals. Alley width of 3 to 5 m was found severely competitive with crops. Leucaena sorghum combination has been economically attractive than a sole crop of sorghum in Andhra Pradesh. In humid conditions of Andamans, Gliricidia sepium when raised on a gravelly sloping land could produce 5 to 6 tons ha lopped biomass in first year, which was further increased during second year. The yield of forages in interspaces ranged from 3.7 to 15.5 tons ha, which was quite low as compared to sole crops. Alley cropping systems is, therefore, highly suited to gravelly sloping lands in high rainfall areas. Strategies for agroforestry development. The very brief overview of the ongoing research in agroforestry reveals that still many systems are anecdotal and all efforts have a common set of overall objectives. These are I. Enhancing output of specific products such as fodder, fuel wood, small timber and crop yield. 2. Improving overall productivity of small farms with minimum external inputs in different agro ecological regions. 3. Devising management techniques that can facilitate profitable use of degraded and unproductive land. 4. Providing environmental amelioration through watershed protection, soil conservation, etc. Besides finding solutions for developing criteria of system evaluation, the following steps are suggested to improve status of agroforestry research. A time frame program must be chalked out for rehabilitation of mangroves along coasts. Techniques are available for planting of mangroves. A mass program should be framed and implemented without further waste of time. Times aquaculture research keeping mangroves intact should be given priority. Genetic improvement of identified potential multipurpose trees. Attention must be paid to organic farming, mycorrhizae in relation to agroforestry and integrated pest management in agroforestry. Times developing network for transferring proven technology to the farmers. Developing mathematical and statistical models after evaluation of the successful agroforestry systems practices. Exploring unexploited and underexploited plants of high economic value such as medicinal aromatic, oil-yielding plants. Research efforts should be made to explore marine algae or seaweeds for food, medicine and green manure. More emphasis should be given in evolving viable techniques for rehabilitation of degraded salt-affected areas involving good quality forages, MPTS, plantation crops and plants of industrial. 237. 927. Application research on quality assessment of the products obtained in saline habitats must be given priority. Promotion of national and international collaborative research programs. Research on saline agriculture including irrigation with saline water, developing halophytic crops involving fish, shrimp culture and poultry with agroforestry systems, genetic improvement of salt-tolerant plants, raising nursery with saline water and multiplication and conservation of useful genetic material should be given attention. Developing more agro-based industries in coastal areas to create more employment through value addition to the product based on coconut oil, palm, honey, cashew nut, rubber, fruit, fish and shrimp, milk, beverage, poultry, seafood and mangrove products. Integrating minor and major fruit crops in agroforestry and home gardens to improve human nutrition and production of cosmeceuticals, nutraceuticals, medicines and aromaceuticals to improve livelihoods and employment potential. Thus, an integrated approach is necessary for research and development of agroforestry that is acceptable to farmers' society and is able to improve their livelihoods besides having potential of more biomass production, fast bioremediation and climate improvement. This approach should be region-specific as the socio-economic conditions of farmers' people and climatic conditions are area-specific. There is also need to give importance to specific zones like coastal areas where coastal zone agriculture and agroforestry which can impart sustainability to the productivity and save the fragile coastal ecosystems from degradation. Agroforestry is thus not only the option but an imperative in view of the global problems of natural resource degradation and expected climatic change. Its role in carbon sequestration, bioremediation, production system diversification is expected to ensure sustainable production and a healthy environment. Social forestry. Social forestry is the practice of forestry on lands outside the conventional forest area for the benefit of the rural and urban communities. The term was coined by J.C. Westerby. It was first recognized as an important component of forestry for meeting rural needs in the interim report of the National Commission on Agriculture, NCA, 1976. The objectives of social forestry adopted by the NCA were to fulfill the basic and economic needs of the community. 238. 927. The scope of social forestry defined by the NCA included farm forestry, community woodlots and reforestation in degraded lands by mid-1980. The concept of social forestry was firmly established as forestry of the people, by the people and for the people. Social forestry includes within its scope the following. I. Farm forestry. Farm forestry is the practice of forestry on farms in the form of raising rows of tree on bunds or boundaries of field and individual trees in private agriculture land as well as creation of windbreaks, which are protective vegetal screens created round a farm or an orchard by raising one or two lines of trees fairly close with shrubs in between. B. Extension forestry. Extension forestry is the practice of forestry in areas devoid of tree growth and other vegetation and situated in places away from the conventional forest areas with the object of increasing the area under tree growth. It includes within its scope the following. I. Mixed forestry. Mixed forestry is practice of forestry for raising fodder grass with scattered fodder trees, fruit trees and fuelwood trees on suitable wastelands, panchayat land and village commons land. 2. Shelter belts. Shelter belts is defined as a belt of trees and or shrubs maintained for the purpose of shelter from wind, sun, snowdrift, etc. They are generally more extensive than the windbreaks covering areas larger than a single farm and sometimes whole regions on a planned pattern or shelter belt is wide belt of tree, shrubs and grasses which goes right across the land at right angle to the direction of prevailing wind in order to times reduce wind velocity times deflect wind current times protect public properly in leeward side 3. Windbreaks. It is a protective planting around a garden, a farm or a field to protect it against strong winds. It usually consists of 2 to 3 rows of trees or shrubs, spaced at 0.5 m to 2.5 m apart, depending on the species. 4. Linear strip plantation. These are plantations of fast-growing species on linear strips of land on the sides of public roads, canals and railway lines. C. Community woodlots. The community woodlots consists of plantations of fuel wood species on community village lands, with intended objective of increasing a villager's access to fuel wood, fruits and fodder. D. Rehabilitation of degraded forests as a third component. The interim report of the NCA, 1976 suggested reforestation of degraded forests to achieve the following objectives: to grow short rotation fuel and timber species for meeting the requirements. 239 Kanagraj Bioscience at GX. 928. To organize fuel wood supplies at reasonable rates. This will prevent pilferage from neighboring commercial forests. To tie up degraded forest areas with the nearby rural and semi-urban centers for their requirements of fuel wood. To provide employment. To rehabilitate the degraded forests in the process. E. Recreation forestry. Recreation forestry is the practice of forestry with the object of raising avenue flowering trees and shrubs mainly to serve as recreation forests for the urban and rural population. This type of forestry is also known as aesthetic forestry, which is defined as the practice of forestry with the object of developing or maintaining a forest of high scenic value. Distinction between social forestry and agroforestry. Social forestry 1. Social forestry is a plantation made on lands outside conventional forest areas for the benefit of rural and urban communities, with objectives to supply fuel wood to divert cow dung from village hearths to village fields, small timber for housing and agricultural implements and fodder for cattle of the rural population, protection of agriculture by creation of diverse ecosystem and arresting wind and water erosion, provide raw material for village cottage industries and improve scenic value in rural and urban areas. 2. It is thus the forestry of the people, by the people and for the people. 3. Planting of trees on massive scale is done on vacant land, community land, roadside railway track and even degraded reserve forest. Helps to 240. Agroforestry 1. Agroforestry is a sustainable land management system that increases the overall production, combines agricultural crops, tree crops and forest plants and/or animals simultaneously or sequentially, and applies management practices that are compatible with the cultural patterns of the local population. 2. It is a system which is rather localized in its concept for managing the unit of land for maximizes production of agricultural crop and forest trees complementary with each other. 3. Agroforestry is practiced mostly in farmers' field-owned land. 928. Shankar IAS Academy eradicate poverty especially among landless and marginal rural people by providing them job potential. 4. Mainly trees and shrubs are to be used to harvest multiple products. 4. It involves integration of 2 or more than 2 components on the same unit of land. 5. Social forestry is primarily a government-based program that aims to increase the forest area by rehabilitating wastelands while producing biomass both for industrial and local uses. 5. Agroforestry involves the rural awakening towards self-sufficiency by producing maximum biomass per unit area, fulfilling their needs of food, fodder and fuel wood etc. Specific examples. Other systems, various forms, silvopastoral systems, woody perennials, pastures, animals, agricultural crops, various forms, agrisilvicultural systems, agrosilvopastoral systems, various forms, classification of agroforestry systems on the basis of nature of components. Shelter belt. Shelter belt is a wide belt of trees, shrubs and grasses, planted in rows which goes right across the land at right angle to the direction of the prevailing winds to deflect air current, to reduce wind velocity and to give general protection to cultivated areas against wind erosion and desiccating effect of the hot winds in leeward side. 241. 929. A typical shelter belt has a triangular cross-section which can be achieved by planting tall trees in the center, flanked on both sides successively by shorter trees, tall shrubs and then low-spreading shrubs and grasses. A certain amount of penetrability is desirable in shelter belts as a result of which the zone of influence is very much greater and the velocity curve shows a smooth, slowly declining trend. The width of shelter belt depends upon local climatic conditions, wind velocity, and the soil type. Shelter belt should be oriented as nearly as possible, at right angles to the prevailing wind in case, where winds blow from different directions, shelter belt should be raised in quadrangles height and spacing. Height of shelter belt is very important, as it affects the distance to which protection will be afforded on the leeward side. Higher the trees forming the shelter belt, the greater is the zone of influence on the leeward side. Times this affects the spacing of the shelter belts also. If wind erosion has to be completely controlled, the second belt should be located a little before the place where the wind on the leeward side of the first shelter belt assumes damaging velocity. Times taking 20% reduction in wind velocity as the basis of usefulness of a shelter belt, effective protection zone extends up to 15 to 20 times the height of the belt. In Rajasthan, taking the height of shelter belt to be about 7.5 m, spacing recommended is 10 times the height, i.e., 75 meters. Length. The length of shelter belt is an important consideration because at the ends of the shelter belt eddies are produced resulting in increasing the wind velocity at these places. It is because of this that road is not ordinarily allowed to cross the shelter belt. In some of the western countries, shelter belts have been raised right across the country for the protection they afford for shorter shelter belt. The minimum length of shelter belt to be most effective is 24 times its height. Soil preparation. Soil preparation should be done at least a year in advance to build up sufficient reserve of soil moisture. 242. 929. It may be done either mechanically or by manual labor. Leguminous crops may be raised for the first few years in between the rows of trees and shrubs for improving the fertility of the soil. Choice of species. The choice of species to be raised in shelter belt is governed by the climate, soil and topography of the area. It is better to raise local species because of their easy establishment. Exotics may also be used to improve the efficiency of the shelter belt's characteristics of tree SPP used for shelter belt. The species selected should be non-exacting, fast-growing, wind-firm, drought-resistant, unpalatable to animals. It should have a dense crown and low branching habit. It should not be leafless at a time when protection is required. It should be economically a multipurpose species, i.e., fit for firewood, timber and fodder. The following species are recommended for creation of shelter belt: grasses Cenchrus barbatus, Sacrum spontaneum, Sacrum munja, Panicum turgidum, Panicum antidote. Shrubs Calotropis procera, Crotolria bahia, Caligonum polygonoides, Clerodendron phlomoides, Cassia auriculata, Dodinella viscosa, Jatropha curcas, Leptidnia spartivum, Agave spp. Sesbania aculeata. Small trees Acacia jacquemonti, Acacia leucofloya, Balinites aegyptiaca, Caparis aphylla, Salvadora oleoides. Trees Acacia arabica, Acacia senegal, Acacia cyanophila, Albizia lebbeck, Azadirachta indica, Dulbergus situ, Lania coromendelica, Parkinsonia aculeata, Prosopis cineraria, Prosopis juliflora, Pongamia pinnata, Tecoma undulata, Tamarix articulatus Eucalyptus spp, Acacia totalis. 243. N929. Method of raising the plants. It is better to sow the seeds in polythene bags and plant out the plants so raised. For this purpose nurseries should be maintained at site. The plant should be regularly watered for 1 or 2 years. Properly fenced to protect them from browsing cattle. Advantages of shelter belts. Very little research work has been done in our country to find out the benefits of the shelter belts on yields of agricultural crops, horticultural crops and grasses. However, on the basis of research work done in Kasri, TNAU and abroad, the following advantages of the shelter belts may be mentioned. Moderating effect on temperature. Shelter belt has a moderating effect on air and soil temperature by lowering the maximum and raising the minimum temperature during daytime. Inside the forest is lower temperature during night is higher inside the forest than open. Increase in humidity. Shelter belts increase relative humidity from 1 to 50%. There is distinctly perceptible increase in the average relative humidity in the agricultural land protected by shelter belts. Reduction in evapotranspiration. Shelter belts reduce evapotranspiration sufficiently in the zone of their influence. Increase in soil moisture. Shelter belts increase the moisture content of the soil on the leeward side and delay its drying up during summer. They also increase the underground water supplies by promoting infiltration in the soil. Reduction in wind velocity and wind erosion. Shelter belts deflect the wind upwards, cause considerable reduction in the wind velocity on the leeward side up to a distance of 15 to 20 times the height of the trees forming the way. 244 930. Shankar IAS Academ. As there is considerable reduction in the wind velocity on the leeward side of a shelter belt, wind erosion is very much reduced. Increase in agricultural and horticultural crops. Shelter belts increase production of agricultural and horticultural crops. Study made in 8 cotton fields in distinctly semi-arid areas of USA revealed an increase of 17.4% in cotton yield when protection against hot winds was provided by shelter belts. Times similar increase in crop yields has been reported from Russia, where a shelter belt of 5 row increased the oat yield by 25% to 28%. Protection of orchards by shelter belt reduces wind damage and increases fruit yield. Studies revealed that even if 0.4 hectare out of 4 hectare orchard is devoted to creation of shelter belt, the remaining protected 3.6 hectare of orchard yielded about 13.00% more than the unprotected 4 hectare orchard. Times similarly, the increase in fodder yield is reported to be as high as 300 to 400%. Protection of damage to public and private property. The shelter belts hold up the movement of shifting sand. Times save the roads and railway tracks from being covered and otherwise damaged by moving sand dunes. They prevent deposition of silt in canals and agricultural fields. Windbreaks. Windbreak is a protective planting around a garden, a farm or a field to protect it against strong winds. It usually consists of 2 to 3 rows of trees or shrubs, spaced at 0.5 m to 2.5 m apart, depending on the species. Soil conservation hedges. In this system, the major groups of components are multipurpose and or fruit trees and common agricultural species. The primary role of multipurpose fruit trees and agricultural species is soil conservation and provision of various tree products. 245. 931. The following tree species are used for soil conservation: Grevillea robusta, Acacia catechu, Pinus roxburghi, Acacia modesta, Prosopis juliflora, Alnus nepalensis, Leucaena leucocephala, etc. Hortisilviculture. It is deliberately integration of horticultural trees with timber trees in order to harvest fruits and timber concurrently from single unit of land. Timber trees are planted on bunds of the orchards, acts as windbreak, thus protect orchard from high winds. Hortisilvopastoral. In this system, various improved leguminous grasses are grown in orchard in order to provide forage to livestock. Trees are planted on the bunds of the orchards. These trees act as windbreaks and protect horticulture plants from high wind. Also provides multiple products. Benefits of social forestry. 1. Increased biodiversity. Growing of trees in barren lands within the community helps to increase the biodiversity value. As trees grow larger, the nature of the habitat will change. Well-managed forests encourage biodiversity as they offer habitation for various animals, plants, shrubs, insects and birds among others. In social forestry, trees and associated plants become the source of food and shelter for a variety of small animals and birds. 2. Carbon removal. In the fight against global warming effect, trees play an essential role in the removal of carbon from the environment. Trees use carbon dioxide when growing and thus removing it from the environment. Social forestry is seen as the best way to reduce carbon dioxide in urban settings. Trees' energy-saving effect also indirectly lowers the carbon dioxide emissions by reducing the demand for power. 3. Soil conservation. Another important benefit of social forestry is soil conservation. Tree roots prevent soil erosion by holding soil in place, mitigating the negative effects of soil erosion. Decaying tree leaves also help form an organic layer on the ground that makes the soil rich while also allowing water to percolate into the soil, reducing the likeliness of runoff and soil erosion. They also act as mulch, reducing evaporation. Roots also reduce soil compaction, decreasing the rate at which rainfall infiltrates soil as well as the capacity of soil to store water. 4. Health benefits. The effects of trees and nature on human health are well reported. Trees and nature are natural remedies for stress and anxiety. Planting trees to human habitats can contribute to better health and improved general well-being. It is also becoming common to find hospitals growing trees due to the healing effect of trees. Studies have shown that hospital patients with a view of trees outside their windows can help them recover faster and with fewer complications. Trees also absorb atmospheric pollutants that can have a negative effect on people's health, such as carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, and particulate matter. 246. 931. Traditionally, trees and forests have been a source of medicinal value for communities around the forest. 5. Community enrichment. An area with an abundance of trees is more attractive. Furthermore, properties in an area with an abundance of trees are more valuable than the same properties in an area without trees. Trees create shade that helps improve the longevity of outdoor furniture and even pavement. 6. Noise reduction. Noise is a big trigger of anxiety and stress. Loud noises can disrupt sleep, affect how people relate with others, and even cause illness. In fact, prolonged exposure to high levels of noise and noise pollution is considered a major cause of hearing loss, although rules and regulations are being put in place to reduce noise pollution in many nations across the globe. Embracing social forestry in urban areas can mitigate the effects of noise pollution. Trees reflect and absorb sound energy, reducing the noise pollution. Furthermore, the noise of trees caused by branches and leaves as they swirl on a windy day helps to mask man-caused sounds, reducing the negative noise. 7. Improve air quality. Trees also help to clean and improve the quality of air. An acre of trees is adequate to generate enough oxygen for up to 18 people. Trees also absorb gaseous pollutants that negatively affect people's health by creating conditions such as asthma and breathing difficulties. Particularly, trees help to clean air by absorbing gaseous pollutants into their leaves and then trap and filter particulates on and through their stems, leaves, and twigs. 8. Energy conservation. Trees act as natural air conditioners. The evaporation from a single tree can have the same cooling effect as 10 room-sized residential air conditioners operating 20 hours a day. Planting 2 or 3 trees in the compound can shade your home from the hot sun, eliminating the need to cool your home and thus lowering the energy needed to heat the house. Trees can also make good screens and act as windbreaks when placed in the path of the prevailing winds, improving heating efficiency. 9. Social benefits. Trees are associated with various social benefits that make the neighborhood more attractive and valuable. Social forestry helps to create inviting and cool areas for relaxation and recreation such as parks and playgrounds. Trees also add exciting color and beauty to the neighborhood as seasons change. The green color creates a calming effect and helps relieve eye strain, contributing to the wellness of the community. Trees also help to screen unattractive views and soften the harsh outline of metal, masonry, steel, asphalt, and glass. Trees also encourage interaction with neighbors by providing areas where people regularly meet. Shortcomings in the social forestry program. Although social forestry as a concept was revolutionary, but in India, it was not too much success. Primarily because of the wrong implementation under the incentive given to farmers and 247. 931. Villagers to encourage social forestry. Many farmers opted for diverting agricultural land to forestry. This compromises agricultural prospect and food security. Although programs suggested usufruct species, but because of lack of ecological understanding and lack of specific directive, most of the plantation opted for is eucalyptus, which is not ecologically suitable in the Indian settings. 1. Success of farm forestry but neglect of village forestry. The program of social forestry has 2 main components: afforestation of village lands and planting trees on private lands called farm forestry. In terms of sheer production of trees, the program of farm forestry has been immensely successful, feeding even to a glut in eucalyptus wood in certain areas of Gujarat and Karnataka. The other component, village community forestry, however, has failed to take off because local people are not effectively involved. Villages are often heterogeneous and lack a cohesive spirit. Village councils are multi-village bodies which do not inspire confidence in every constituent village. And there is no tradition of management of common lands. 2. Market-oriented trees preferred, fuel wood and fodder trees neglected. This not only implied deviation from the stated objectives of social forestry, but also resulted in increased pressure on forest land as the farmers continued to collect branches, twigs, leaves, and grasses, as before, from the forests. 3. Shortage of funds. With the government funds committed to match foreign contributions for social forestry projects, the forest lands became starved of funds. 4. Faulty species selection and unscientific methods. Species selection and spacing was not always carefully examined. The species yielding intermediate products were not properly appreciated. Also, the production of grasses, legumes, fodder, fruit, and other items of minor forest produce were neglected. Spacing between the trees was also reduced to avoid intermediate management operations, cut down plantation cost, and reduce staff supervision time. As a consequence, spacing, thinning and pruning which could have produced immediate yields of grass and tree products for people, were not taken up. Thus, it has become clear now that the nature of species should be changed from teak, eucalyptus and other timber-only trees to usufruct-based trees, such as neem, mahua, karanj, sal arjun and palmyra. These should be supplemented with grasses, shrubs, bushes to yield fuel wood and fodder in the shortest possible time. 248. 932. 2. Forest products. Forest produce is defined under Section 2(4) of the Indian Forest Act, 1927. Its legal definition includes timber, charcoal, caoutchouc, catechu, wood oil, resin, natural varnish, bark lac mirabilis, mahua flowers, whether found inside or brought from a forest or not, trees and leaves, flowers and fruit, plants, including grass, creepers, reeds and moss, wild animals, skins, tusks, horns, bones, cocoons, silk, honey, wax, other parts or produce of animals, and also includes peel, surface soil, rocks and minerals etc. when found inside or brought from a forest, among other things. Forest produce can be divided into several categories. From the point of view of usage, forest produce can be categorized into 3 types: timber, non-timber and minor minerals. Non-timber forest products, NTFs, are known also as minor forest produce, MFP, or non-wood forest produce, NWFP. The NTFP can be further categorized into medicinal and aromatic plants, MAP, all seeds, fiber and floss, resins, edible plants, bamboo, reeds and grasses. Minor forest produce core of tribal economy. In pockets where the concentrations of tribal population is high and where they live in close relation with the forests, the gathering of non-timber forest products, NTFPs, and what are commonly called as minor forest producers, MFPs, contribute substantive income to the families. Simultaneously, agriculture in these regions is very difficult and the farm incomes are low. It is therefore important that gathering of MFPs is considered at par with agriculture and provided necessary environment for high-level monetization. Tribal society and cultivation practices. As per 2011 census, the tribal community population of the country accounts for 8% while the tribal population is spread across the nation's geography. The concentrated pockets mostly pan across the central Indian, eastern and northeastern states. In a number of eastern states like Jharkhand, Odisha and Chhattisgarh, the tribal population goes up to as high as 23%, and within these states there are districts with tribal community as the majority population. The social and economic life of these communities is woven around the forests, dwell as they amidst the forests. In majority of such areas, hot only is agricultural land not settled under individual ownership and continues as community-owned land. The practice of agriculture is also not sustainable. Since agriculturally fertile land as the ratio of the total land in their dwelling region is less, the tribal society practices shifting cultivation along the slopes of hillocks which goes by different names like jum, podu, etc. The practice in essence is slash and burn, where under the vegetation is put to fire during summers and the land is readied for raising millets and pulses. After raising the crops in successive years for about 3 to 4 seasons, they move on to the next hillock to let the cultivated space rejuvenate. The cycle of such cultivation has gradually dwindled on account of growing population and restrictions brought under the Forest Act, making cultivation unsustainable. 249. 935. The tribal communities gather different kinds of minor forest producers, MFP, from the forest areas, and this constitutes a major source of income. Changing forest laws. Over the civilizational times, the traditional forest was a mixed forest that yielded a range of non-timber forest products, NTFP. These encompassed tree bush-borne oilseeds, fruits, flowers, roots, shoots, leaves, bark and herbs. They were the source of food and medicine, apart from constituting the ecology. The rights of forest were entirely usufruct rights, which meant that there was no claim over the land. The Forest Act, 1927, changed the nature of relationship between the tribal society and the forests as the latter came to be notified as out of bound for the tribal communities. With this piece of law, the tribal communities who had been living in symphony with forests for ages came to be rendered as trespassers. While this position continued for many decades, including after independence, the provisions of the Panchayats, Extension to Scheduled Areas, Act, 1996, commonly known as PESA, made a favorable breakthrough in favor of the TIAVN-BILS. However, while the Act conferred the ownership of minor forest producers, MFP, it did not define the term, leaving a critical lacuna. In addition, no mechanism was provided for framing of rules at state level, so that a clear definition could emerge based on the local circumstances. Another major deficiency of this act was that the ownership of MFP was conferred on the Gram Sabha and not the NTFP gatherers. A favorable change in this regard came to be achieved through the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights, Act, 2006. This act, commonly known as Forest Rights Act, was brought in to correct the deficiencies of PESA. That this act confers the tribal gatherers a legal ownership over the MFP is a positive measure in the relationship between the tribal society and the forests. With proper implementation of the provisions of this act, the rights of TIAVN-BILS society can be well protected. Issues relating to MFP. Over the period, large extent of MFP-bearing forests have made way for timber plantations, thereby reducing the availability of minor forest produce. The estimated value of MFP in raw form collected by the tribal communities is around 2 lakh crore a year, and these produces gathered by the TIAVN-BILS find their way for use in various pharmaceuticals, FMCG items and confectionaries. Various forest surveys have brought out that the canopy cover in many for various forest regions is need of restoration. In order to impart greater relevance to the legal right that Forests Rights Act, 2016 confers upon the tribal communities in respect of MFPs, it is important that these forests are developed comprehensively to improve the density and yield levels. It is estimated that if this is done, the value of MFPs in raw form itself would multiply at least 5 to 6 times, implying that greater income can be transferred to the tribal communities. 250. 935. The tribal communities gather different kinds of minor forest producers, MFP, from the forest areas, and this constitutes a major source of income. Changing forest laws. Over the civilizational times, the traditional forest was a mixed forest that yielded a range of non-timber forest products, NTFP. These encompassed tree bush-borne oilseeds, fruits, flowers, roots, shoots, leaves, bark and herbs. They were the source of food and medicine, apart from constituting the ecology. The rights of forest were entirely usufruct rights, which meant that there was no claim over the land. The Forest Act, 1927, changed the nature of relationship between the tribal society and the forests as the latter came to be notified as out of bound for the tribal communities. With this piece of law, the tribal communities who had been living in symphony with forests for ages came to be rendered as trespassers. While this position continued for many decades, including after independence, the provisions of the Panchayats, Extension to Scheduled Areas, Act, 1996, commonly known as PESA, made a favorable breakthrough in favor of the TIAVN-BILS. However, while the Act conferred the ownership of minor forest producers, MFP, it did not define the term, leaving a critical lacuna. In addition, no mechanism was provided for framing of rules at state level, so that a clear definition could emerge based on the local circumstances. Another major deficiency of this act was that the ownership of MFP was conferred on the Gram Sabha and not the NTFP gatherers. A favorable change in this regard was came to be achieved through the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act, 2006. This act, commonly known as Forest Rights Act, was brought in to correct the deficiencies of PESA. That this act confers the tribal gatherers a legal ownership over the MFP is a positive measure in the relationship between the tribal society and the forests. With proper implementation of the provisions of this act, the rights of TRNBILS society can be well protected. Issues relating to MFP. Over the period, large extent of MFP-bearing forests have made way for timber plantations, thereby reducing the availability of minor forest produce. The estimated value of MFP in raw form collected by the tribal communities is around 2 rupees lakh crore a year, and these produces gathered by the TRNBILS find their way for use in various pharmaceuticals, FMCG items and confectionaries. Various forest surveys have brought out that the canopy cover in many for various forest regions is need of restoration. In order to impart greater relevance to the legal right that Forests Rights Act, 2016 confers upon the tribal communities in respect of MFPs, it is important that these forests are developed comprehensively to improve the density and yield levels. It is estimated that if this is done, the value of MFPs in raw form itself would multiply at least 5 to 6 times, implying that greater income can be transferred to the tribal communities. 250. 936. Apart from the need to develop these forest-bearing MFPs, another challenge relates to capturing the value in favor of the tribal communities. This is akin to what a general farmer faces in case of the farm-grown produces. It estimated that the MFP gatherers received not more than 20% of the value of their produce, and the major share is cornered by the middlemen. The gatherers are mostly dependent on weekly hearts for marketing their produce. Though there are state corporations dedicated to serve the marketing needs of the MFPs, they have not fully succeeded in transferring right value to the gatherers. The practices at the weekly hearts are opaque, and there exists no marketing system to ensure fairness and efficiency of transactions. The share of the gatherers in the consumer's rupee in case of MFP at 20% is lower even than a horticulture producer's share, which stands at 50%, and is much lower than that in case of a cereal producer whose share is anywhere around 70%. The challenge and answer to improving the incomes from MFPs in favor of the tribal communities lies in creating an efficient marketing structure that will remove intermediaries who do not add any value, and thereby increase the share of the MFP gatherers in consumers' rupee to a minimum level of 50%. Along with efficient marketing, other dimensions of monetization include logistics, storage, transportation, etc. and value addition, which will further push up the share in the consumer's rupee. The scope for promoting value addition facilities in case of MFPs is vast. Recommendations. It is necessary to recognize non-timber forest products, NTFPs, as a source of income at par with agriculture in case of the tribal communities, and facilitate them to improve the practices of gathering MFPs. This requires proper training and orientation, use of appropriate mechanization process and harvesting practices. 2. It would help to promote the self-help groups, SHGs, of the gatherers and provide them with a well-appointed place, drying yard, storage, primary processing support, etc., so that the small lots can be aggregated and traded more efficiently. 3. The trading of MFPs can also be integrated with online agriculture trade platforms like ENAM by developing needed standards, rates, etc., and developing assaying labs. The provision for trading in MFP, including online trading, can become part of the State Marketing Act APLM, or if the states feel necessary, they may enact a separate act on similar lines as that of agricultural marketing. The act can be called as Minor Forest Produce Marketing, Promotion and Facilitation Act. The Union Ministry of Tribal Welfare can develop and share model act and rules with the states for adoption. 4. Comprehensive development of the NTFPs may be taken up, and funds available under various ongoing schemes like MNREGA, tribal subplans, etc. can be used. MFP value system supported by integrated value chain and supply chain management may be put in place. 251. 937. Minor forest products. 6. Now that the government is promoting agroforestry and bamboo under the National Bamboo Mission outside the forest areas, even these products can become part of the MFP value system. Edible products, fruits, flowers, seeds, roots, rhizomes, tubers, etc. of several forest species are edible. Fruits and seeds of Anacardium occidental, Tamarindus indica, Syzygium comini, Embleca officinalis, Boichnania lanzan, etc., flowers of Maduka indica, green pods of Moringa oleifera, new shoots of bamboo, etc. are in great demand. Grasses. Grazing forests provide grazing facility to about 30% of the total livestock population of the country. Grasses such as Cencruz, Lacerus, Heteropogon, Bothrioclea, Andropogon, Eragrostis, Icilema, etc. are abundantly found in the forest as a ground cover. Some grasses like Eulaliopsis binta are also used for rope and paper making, and fodder trees and shrubs. Forests provide fodder from trees, shrubs and climbers. Leaf fodder of several tree species is almost as nutritious as that of agricultural fodder crops. Good fodder yielding tree species includes Ailanthus excelsa, Moringa oleifera, Sesbania spp, Morus alba, Albigia Lebbeck, Leucaena leucocephala, Pongamia pinnata, Hardwickia binta, Quercus, Gruyia, Boyhinia, Celtis, etc. Several shrubs, herbs and climbers also yield good quality fodder leaves. Bamboo canes, and India is very rich in bamboo resources. The bamboo is used for housing, for rural agricultural works, for paper pulp, for packaging and other uses. All seeds. Many tree species produce oil-bearing seeds, which are commercially important. Some of these oils are fit for human consumption. Generally, these seeds are used in soap industry. TRNBILS use these oils for various purposes. Essential oils. Essential oils are a good source of forest revenue. Many species in the Indian forest yield essential oils, which are used in making perfumes, soaps, cosmetics, etc. R. Kanagraj, Faculty, Agriculture 252. 937. Tans and dyes. A variety of vegetable tanning material are produced in the forest. Important ones include the myrobalan nuts and bark of wattle, acacia, myrncel, A. decurense, A. nilotica and Cassia auriculata, etc. Other tanning materials include leaves of Embolica officinalis and Anogesis latifolia, of Calistanthus calinus, fruits of Ziziphus xylopyra, bark of Cassia fistula, Terminalia alta, T. arjuna, etc. Bark gums and resins. Gums and resins are exuded by trees as a result of incision or injury to the bark of wood. Gums are collected from several tree species. Resins find wide use in industries and in Indian pharmacy. Fibers, flosses and a wide range of plants, yielding fiber occur in the forests of India. Fibers are obtained from tissues of different parts of certain woody plants, which are used for making cloth, rope and cordage. Flavoring plants. A variety of plants including cumin, seeds of carom kavi, cinnamon, bark of Cinnamomum zeylanicum, cardamom, dried capsule of Elateria cardamomum, bay leaf, leaves of Cinnamomum thamala, are obtained from forests used locally and throughout the world. Animal products. Animal products include lac, honey, silk, horns, fur, skins, tusks, musk, bones, fur and feathers, meat, etc. Lac is a resinous secretion of the lac insects which feed on forest trees, particularly on Butea monosperma. Similarly, silkworm is reared on Terminalia alta and Morus alba plantations. Honey is another important product obtained from forests. Leaves of various forest tree species have been used for various purposes since the ancient times and help earn forest revenue. Leaves of several trees and shrubs are widely used as food, fodder, medicine, etc. Other than these, leaves of some trees and shrubs are put to the following uses: leaves, making plates and cups, times thatching, basket making, umbrella making, bidi, leaves for smoking. 253. 937. Tendu and other leaves. Tendu leaves, Dispyros melanoxylon, are used to prepare bidis and therefore, these are also called bidi leaves. Leaves of trees such as Bohenia spp shoria robusta, Pterospermum acerifolium, etc. are used for making plates, dona, etc. The central government had introduced a minimum support price, MSP, for a select list of MFP through mechanism for marketing of minor forest produce through minimum support price and development of value chain of MFP scheme in 2011 to provide a social safety net to these underprivileged forest dwellers and to aid in their empowerment. Thrived, as the apex national organization involved in the improvement of the livelihood and empowerment of these tribal people, is the nodal agency for the implementation of the scheme. The Vandhan tribal startups, also a component of the same scheme, further complements MSP beautifully and has emerged as a source of employment generation for tribal gatherers and forest dwellers and the homebound tribal artisans. Agriculture. 254. 938. 3. Conservation of forest flora and fauna. Forests are a unique gift of nature to man and constitute one of the prized assets of a nation. They are of both direct and indirect use, and hence are aptly termed as an index of prosperity of a nation. Keeping in view the benefits which we derive from forests, it is of utmost importance that strong steps be taken to conserve forests. Figure 1. Ecosystem services provided by forests: biodiversity, carbon, watershed, salt conservation, recreational and cultural, cereal and economic benefits for communities, high conservation value. The growing need to sustainably manage forest ecosystems and their services and benefits. The world's forests cover 30% of the Earth's surface and serve as a source of diverse values to human society. Healthy forest ecosystems provide a wide range of services including reliable clean water, climate regulation, and productive soils, and forests underpin many of society's basic needs, economic processes, and cultural or spiritual values. Responsibly managed forests are critically important in slowing climate change while improving the quality of people's lives. Not only are forests home to more than 80% of all species living on land, they are also crucial sources of food, medicine, drinking water, and immense recreational, aesthetic, and spiritual benefits for millions of people. 1. Biodiversity conservation. Forest biological diversity is a broad term that refers to all life forms found within forested areas and the ecological roles they perform. As such, forest biological diversity encompasses not just trees, but the multitude of plants, animals and microorganisms that inhabit forest areas and their associated genetic diversity. Tropical, temperate and boreal forests provide the most diverse sets of habitats for all types of life, together holding more than 80% of the world's terrestrial species of animals, plants and insects. Within specific forest ecosystems, this biodiversity is required in order for the ecosystem to continue maintaining its basic ecological processes. The loss of biodiversity can make forests less resilient to withstand threats such as climate change and habitat degradation, creating a negative feedback cycle that ultimately leads to even more biodiversity loss. 255. 938. Forest biodiversity provides society with numerous ecosystem services, including by serving as a storehouse of genetic material for the development of medicines to treat illness and disease. Recent estimates suggest that 3/4 of the top-ranking global prescription drugs contain components derived from plant extracts, many of which come from the world's forests. 2. Climate regulation. Forests play a key role within the global carbon cycle, removing carbon dioxide, CO2, from the atmosphere and converting it to wood as they grow, and releasing carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere when trees are burned or decay. The forest and land use sector is thus unique in that it can act as either a source or a sink for carbon, with the potential to sequester carbon and thus reduce net CO2 emissions. Deforestation contributes 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and represents the second largest source of annual CO2 emissions after fossil fuel combustion. If tropical deforestation was a country, its emissions would be the third largest in the world behind only China and the US. 3. Soil conservation and prevention of land degradation and desertification. In various forest ecosystem types all over the world, forests play a critical role in building and maintaining soil fertility. Trees take up nutrients from the soil to enable their growth, and return nutrients back to the soil as they decay. Forests also act to promote soil stability, as the complex networks of tree roots present in a healthy forest act to hold soil in place, even on steep hillsides during heavy rainfall when soil would otherwise erode away. Yet as forests worldwide are being cleared, the resulting land becomes vulnerable to a process of soil degradation, which in some cases can lead to desertification and the inability of the land to support either agriculture or forestry. While desertification can be reversed through intensive land restoration interventions, the constraints facing many of the world's farmers, particularly in the global south, leads to a scenario in which degraded land is typically abandoned in pursuit of more productive soils, often leading to further forest clearance. 4. Water regulation and conservation. Forests also offer important ecosystem or watershed services related to water provision and regulation. Healthy forest ecosystems can filter out water pollution, regulate stream flows, recharge aquifers, and absorb flooding. The ability of forests to provide these green infrastructure services can complement or substitute for built infrastructure, in many cases providing these critical services for a fraction of the cost of installing and maintaining comparable gray infrastructure. For example, reforesting hillsides can limit sedimentation in a hydropower station's reservoir, protecting the turbines from damage and prolonging the life of the reservoir, and also provide immediate, direct benefits for rural communities nearby in terms of soil retention, reduced flood risk, or enhanced groundwater recharge. These watershed services provided by forests are particularly important in the context of growing freshwater scarcity worldwide. According to some estimates, by 2025 1.8 billion people will be living in regions with absolute water scarcity, and 2/3 of the world's population could 256. 3. 939. Experience water stress conditions. Already, about 1/3 of the world's largest cities obtain a significant portion of their drinking water directly from forested protected areas, and this proportion increases to about 44% when including water source originating in distant protected forested watersheds and other forests managed in a way that prioritize their water provisioning functions. These linkages need to be better integrated into economic policy and planning, as the water storage services of forests can in many cases be significantly higher than the potential timber value of those forests. 5. Recreation. For untold millennia, human societies have valued the aesthetic, recreational, and spiritual offerings of forest ecosystems. In many traditional cultures, stories of human origins are tied to specific forested areas, and forests are understood to have a unique life force or creative power. While not all human communities frame this understanding within explicitly metaphysical language, virtually all societies with access to forests value their recreational services in some capacity, whether it be hiking, bird watching, hunting, or simply taking in the scenic beauty offered by forests. These services provide a wealth of recreational enjoyment that is not easily quantified, but should nonetheless be valued. In formal economic terms, forests generate recreational revenue through use or entry fees in the case of parks or managed natural areas, and through the growing ecotourism sector. 6. Disaster risk reduction. Finally, forest ecosystems can play a crucial role in disaster risk reduction, acting as a natural buffer to prevent or mitigate natural disasters which threaten property and life. By absorbing rainfall and stabilizing land, intact forest ecosystems act to prevent flooding and landslides, which can be particularly deadly where forests have been cleared on hillsides above human settlements. Mangroves, a type of coastal forest ecosystem, play a critical role in weakening the power of storm surges in hurricanes and tropical storm events, limiting the extent of coastal flooding. This serves to reduce the risk of injury or death to coastal residents, and limits the severity of property damage that may have occurred had the mangrove forests not been present. Estimates suggest that natural disasters caused by anthropogenic ecosystem disruption already cost the world more than $300 billion per year. Protecting forests ecosystems will only become more important in limiting this damage and disruption as climate change, population growth, and land degradation act as threat multipliers, likely increasing the frequency and severity of natural disasters in years to come. 257. 940. Strategy for forest conservation. Conservation needs different strategies. They can be species-based or habitat-based or ecosystem-based. Some species are given importance at national level while some needs treatment at international levels. Most of the conservation is done at in situ and ex situ condition. In this unit we will discuss what these conditions mean, what is the difference between them, and what are the methods and technique used. We have also described some important projects such as Project Tiger and how this project had helped in increasing tiger population. Some techniques such as seed bank and tissue culture are also provide very helpful in conservation of plants which fulfill several of our needs. In situ conservation means on-site conservation. It is the process of protecting an endangered plant or animal species in its natural habitat, either by protecting or cleaning up the habitat itself, or by defending the species from predators. The benefit to in situ conservation is that it maintains recovering populations in the surroundings where they have developed their distinctive properties. Wildlife conservation is mostly based on in situ conservation. This involves the protection of wildlife habitats. Also, sufficiently large reserves are maintained to enable the target species to exist in large numbers. The population size must be sufficient to enable the necessary genetic diversity to survive within the population. Ex situ conservation means, literally, off-site conservation. It is the process of protecting population of an endangered species of plant or animal by removing it from an unsafe or threatened habitat and placing it or part of it under the care of humans. While ex situ conservation is comprised of some of the oldest and best known conservation methods known to human, it also involves newer, sometimes controversial laboratory methods. Ex situ conservation, while helpful in humans' efforts to sustain and protect our environment, is rarely enough to save a species from extinction. It is to be used as a last resort or as a supplement to in situ conservation because it cannot recreate the habitat as a whole, the entire genetic variation of a species, its symbiotic counterparts, or those elements which, over time, might help a species adapt to its changing surroundings. Furthermore, ex situ conservation techniques are often costly. Plants and animals living in ex situ breeding grounds have no natural defense to the diseases and pests new to the species. In situ conservation. This approach deals with maintaining species in their natural habitats, which is believed to be the best way to maintain the Earth's biological diversity. It also allows natural evolutionary processes to continue and for species to keep on adapting to their surroundings. However, this needs good management practices and controlled land use to ensure the successes of conservation objectives. Thus protected areas play a very important role in situ conservation of species, particularly threatened species, by ensuring conservation of their habitat. 258. 940. When a location is selected, the design of the preserved area plays an important role and is characterized by three important characteristics: size, shape, and connectivity. If the size of the preserved area is big, it increases the number of species contained in preserved area. The rounder shape minimizes edge effects because the perimeter, edge, is smaller relative to the area inside than with other shapes. Connectivity between potential fragments allows members of the same species to immigrate and interbreed. The connections are also called corridors. Buffer zones are another important preserve characteristic. A buffer zone is moderately utilized land that provides a transition into the unmodified natural habitat in the core preserve where no human disturbance is allowed. Buffer zones are very important for both psychological and practical reasons, and from this zone inhabitants of the area can derive some benefits from the preserve. By permitting moderate recreational forestry, farming and other activities, buffer zone provides jobs and income with no ill effects on species in the core preserve. Other types of areas that are important for in situ conservation of species are national parks and sanctuaries. Most national parks are areas of land that have great natural beauty, which are set aside and protected for the conservation of habitat of many plants and animals. In national parks, peoples are allowed to enjoy the scenery and wildlife, but visitor management is often required to reduce conflicts between recreation and conservation. National parks are largely natural and unchanged by human activities, but many of them already had existing human impacts before they were designated for protection, and human activities have often been allowed to continue. People have no rights in a national park. The first wildlife sanctuary was the Vedankangal Bird Sanctuary near Madras, set up in 1878, which merely formalized the traditional protection afforded by villagers for pelicans, herons and other birds breeding at Vedankangal. Another such sanctuary was set up at Ranganthittu near Mysore, in 1942. As in 2018, India has 103 national parks, 536 wildlife sanctuaries and 18 biosphere reserves. Captive breeding programs. Captive breeding does play an important role in elephant conservation. Some of the most successful captive breeding programs are those where elephants are kept under semi-natural conditions like in forest camps. In the forest camps in southern India, elephants have been seen to regularly breed in captivity, and it has also been observed that the elephant population has sustained itself without the addition of any elephant from the wild. In most forest camps, bulls and cows of all ages are kept together and are allowed to mingle with each other. They are also left in the forests at night, so that they can feed. Sometimes, the cows have been known to mate with wild bulls. 259. Kanagraj Bioscience at G. 941. Crocodile conservation. In situ conservation of selected species of birds and reptiles has been fortified through captive breeding programs. The Government of India started a crocodile breeding and management project in 1976 to save the three endangered crocodilian species, the freshwater crocodile, saltwater crocodile and the gharial. Thousands of crocodiles of these three species have been reared at 16 centers, and several of these have been released into the wild. 11 sanctuaries have been declared specially for crocodile protection, including the National Chambal Sanctuary in Madhya Pradesh. The endangered white-winged wood duck was also bred in captivity and released into protected areas of the Northeast, in an Indo-British collaborative program. 11. Ex situ conservation. XC2 conservation is comprised of some of the oldest and best known conservation methods known to human. It also involves newer, sometimes controversial laboratory methods. XC2 conservation has certain limitations for conservation of animals. These include adaptation problems, loss of genetic variability due to inbreeding, and concentration in small place, surplus animals, and continuity in funds. Research on captive population can provide insight into the basic biology of the species and suggest new conservation strategies. However, much more needs to be done to protect global resource, flora and fauna, needed for healthy and productive animals and plants that are used for food, material, economic and aesthetic needs of the society. Botanical gardens. Together, the world's 1,500 botanic gardens, Fig 8.4, arboreta, and national plant collections maintain the largest array of plant diversity outside of nature, and they have major, if often overlooked, potential as resource centers for conservation, education, and development. If the infrastructure and technical facilities of most of these institutions can be strengthened, they can conserve XC2 stocks of most of the world's endangered plant species. Already, individuals of an estimated 12,000 to 15,000 threatened species are being cultivated in botanic gardens and arboreta. Zoological parks. The basic philosophy behind the creation of zoological parks in modern times is to create an understanding of the environment and ecological balance of life, meaning strengthening the bond between people and the living earth. These zoological parks are no mere picnic spots. They are now centers for XC2 wildlife conservation and environmental education. The history of modern zoos has started some 200 years ago with the creation of the first public zoo. Since then, every part of the world has developed their own zoological parks with great diversity such as aquaria, bird parks, private zoos and safari parks. The World Zoo Conservation Strategy concludes that the evolution of zoos should continue to help the conservation of wildlife. 260. Heech. TageNightIll.com 941. There are several species of wildlife which would have been extinct today except for efforts by 2005 and animal reserves. Seed bank. The preservation of plant germplasm in seed banks, or genebanks, is one of the techniques of XC2 conservation of plant species. Seeds have a natural dormancy feature, which allows for their suspended preservation for long periods of time with little damage, provided the conditions are favorable. Banking dormant seeds enables to keep genetically representative samples of rare and endangered plant species as a kind of genetic insurance. Seeds storing germplasm in seed banks is both inexpensive and space efficient. It allows preservation of large populations with little genetic erosion. Seed banks also offer good sources of plant material for biological research, and avoid disturbance or damage of natural populations. Tissue culture. Plant tissue culture is an essential component of plant biotechnology. The possibility to regenerate whole plant from protoplasts, single cells, tissues and organs, in vitro, has opened out entirely new approaches to plant improvement, and has considerably enhanced the efficiency of the conventional methods of plant breeding and plant propagation. Forest conservation does not mean the denial of use, but rather the proper use without causing any adverse effect on our economy and environment. It is the practice of planning and maintaining forested areas for the benefit and sustainability of future generations. The following techniques could be used for forest conservation, which could eventually improve forested areas and make the available resources sustainable. Afforestation. It is the planting of trees for commercial purposes. Instead of taking resources from existing natural forests, afforestation is a process used to plant trees and use them as resources instead of naturally existing forests. It also creates habitat for wildlife, recreational areas, and commercial use while not causing harm to natural forests. Van Mahotsava was launched in 1950 to make people aware of the importance of planting trees. Selective logging. It is a method used to meet the needs of both the forests and humans seeking economical resources. 261. 942. Selective logging is the removal of trees within a stand based on size limitations. This technique allows for forest regeneration to occur between and after the selective harvest cycles. Controlling forest fires. Forest fires are the most common and deadly cause of loss of forests. They can start due to natural causes or can be accidents caused by man. Hence, precautions must be taken for such incidents. Making fire lanes, spreading chemicals to control fire, clearing out dry leaves and trees, etc. Better farming practices. Slash and burn farming, overgrazing by cattle, shifting agriculture are all farming practices that are harmful to the environment and particularly to forests. Hence, these practices must be kept under control. Checking forest clearances for urbanization. In the era of rapid urbanization and industrialization, clearing of forests either by encroachment or actual grant of permission is often done. Hence, strict policies should be in place, so as to avoid forest land from urban encroachment. Forest Policy and Law for Conservation. Indian Forest Policy, 1952. This was a simple extension of colonial forest policy, which became conscious about the need to increase forest cover to 1/3 of total land area. The policy laid stress on weaning the primitive people by persuasion from the harmful practice of shifting cultivation, increasing efficiency of forest administration by having adequate forest laws, providing facilities for forest research and for conducting research in forestry and forest products utilization. Controlling grazing in Forestry. Forest Conservation Act 1980. This act stipulated that the central permission is necessary to practice sustainable agroforestry in forest areas. Violation or lack of permit was treated as a criminal offense. It targeted to limit deforestation, conserve biodiversity and save wildlife. This act provided hope of forest conservation, but wasn't successful. 262. 942. Forest policy of 1988 times it made a very significant and categorical shift from commercial concerns to focus on the ecological role of the forests and participatory management it aims were times maintenance of environmental stability through preservation and restoration of ecological balance times check on soil erosion and denudation in catchment areas times substantive increase in forest cover through massive afforestation and social forestry programs times increase in productivity of forests to meet national needs. Other related acts for forest conservation are Wildlife Protection Act 1972. It provides for the establishment of wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, etc. Times the National Board for Wildlife was constituted to offer advice to the central government on issues of wildlife conservation in India. National Green Tribunal Act 2010. This was for effective and expeditious disposal of cases relating to environmental protection and conservation of forests and other natural resources, including enforcement of any legal right relating to environment and giving relief and compensation for damages to persons and property and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Compensatory Afforestation Fund Act 2016. It seeks to provide an appropriate institutional mechanism, both at the center and in each state and union territory, to ensure expeditious utilization in efficient and transparent manner of amounts released in lieu of forest land diverted for non-forest purpose, which would mitigate impact of diversion of such forest land. What other initiatives measures can be taken to conserve forests? Support NGOs movements. The Cheapko movement is a living example of how general public action on forests can help conserve them. NGOs like the Tree Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, the Sierra Club, Center for Biological Diversity, and Rainforest Action Network offset deforestation and conserve threatened ecosystems around the world. In the absence of effective and environmentally friendly governance in many areas, NGOs provide important organizational and monetary support for a variety of conservation efforts. 263. 943. Buy forest-friendly or certified products. There is a need to use one's purchasing power in a high-impact way to prevent deforestation. Buying products that are certified sustainable could help in certain manner to conserve forests. Promoting value education on forests. Inculcating the principles to value forests through education and promoting forests like a tourist center could help people realize the crucial role forests play and eventually make them more responsible.